Hello everybody and welcome to Path to Platinum, the series where the only guides my viewers care about are the ones that cover the From Software games. If this video is anything like my Dark Souls guides, then this video should get at least 50,000 views, and it fucking better. Today we're going to cover a game that is notoriously famous for being very challenging and difficult, even more so than the games that preceded it. And that game is Sekiro. Shadows die a fucking lot more than twice, I'll tell you that much. Now, I'm writing this part of the script before I've actually done any real editing for this video, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that this video is gonna be long as shit, because there is a lot to cover here. But before we get into that, if you guys enjoy this video or it helps you out, then please don't forget to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and of course hit that notification bell to support me, and I would really appreciate that. It would mean a lot. And just another tidbit I'd like to throw out there, I live stream here on my channel as regularly as my free time allows, so consider stopping by to hang out and chill with me in the game. Occasionally it's a great time where shit like this happens every now and then.
Oh, no, it jumped on the cliff again! No! Okay, we're good? No! No! Ah, shit! Oh, he threw me off the cliff! No! Ah, shit!
Alright, so now that we got all that nasty business out of the way, it's time we really delve into this brutally unforgiving world and go over how best to make the experience more manageable overall for us shitty gamers out there. This is Sekiro. Now, before we get into anything specific, this beginning portion of the video, I'm going to take some time to go over important facts that you should know before you really start playing and progressing through the game. One of the first things you need to know is that you're gonna die. A lot. Now, for people who don't know too much about this game, you'll notice that every time you truly die, not counting the resurrecting, I mean when you die and actually reset at the last checkpoint, you will be vaguely notified about the presence of dragon rot and its negative effects on your world and the people in it. Now, I myself saw this and I was highly intimidated. It added so much extra stress on me to think about the fact that every time I fucked up and died, something terrible was happening to my file. And maybe even something I potentially couldn't reverse if I didn't get better at the game. However, this was not at all the case. You will be pleased to know that Dragon Rot has absolutely no bearing on the trophy list whatsoever. So for peace of mind, just know that you can happily die as many times as you want, and you will never be locked out of any of the trophy-related content in this game. To put it into perspective for you, I platinumed this entire game and never once cured any of my characters from their infections, so rest assured, all good things will come in time. And of course, through trial and error. The second thing I'll mention is that this game's trophy list asks that you play through this game a grand total of 4 playthroughs in order to get every ending available in the game. Now, obviously, for a trophy hunter, this is asking a lot. I'm sure there are those of you who love the shit out of this game and would be more than happy to spend that many hours playing, but admittedly, as good as this game is, fuck that! I'm a goddamn trophy hunter. I got shit to do! I have an entire backlog of PS3 games that I still need the platinum in, for Christ's sakes. There is no way in fuck I am doing 4 playthroughs of this game. So for that reason, we're going to be using save scumming, which essentially means we're going to be backing up our save files at certain points throughout the game. Doing this will make it so that we only need to play completely through 1 playthrough and a portion of a second via New Game Plus. Backing up your save file is a feature I highly encourage you all to make use of. When you make mistakes in this game, depending on what they are, they could be pretty devastating. So just try to make it a habit of backing up your save file every now and then. Seriously, there's no such thing as being too prepared. Do it as much as you'd like. As for when the best moments to do so specifically are, I will be talking more about that as the video goes on, so no worries, I got your back. Thirdly, it's important to note that this game has a few missables. You should keep in mind that the further you progress the story, if you're too careless, you might pass a point of no return and lock yourself out of certain collectibles and upgrades that you will need to platinum. So that being said, it's very important to take the time to make sure you've done all of the optional content that's required of you as far as the trophies are concerned. Lastly, I will mention that the trophy Height of Technique is slightly misleading in its description. It simply states to have acquired all skills, however this isn't necessarily true. There are skills throughout the game that can be learned or purchased that don't count towards this trophy at all. Basically, the way you need to look at it is this. There are 4 different art scrolls that can be obtained throughout the game, and these 4 scrolls are the only ones that matter towards this trophy. Any skills that can be found or obtained via other methods have no bearing towards the progress of this trophy. Simply be focused on completing the skill trees in these 4 scrolls and you will be fine. Any skills obtained through other means, like the ones purchased from the merchants, don't matter and they can be ignored. Now, to that end, the way this video will be structured is that I will be playing through my entire first playthrough alongside you guys, grabbing every single missable and collectible needed in order to platinum in the order of which they become available to you. So as long as you're following along with the video, I can assure that you won't miss anything important. Now, if you're not new to this game and you want to skip ahead to a specific part of my playthrough so that you can go over the information you need more specifically, then feel free to use the timestamp navigation tool in the description to skip to a specific point of the game. However, if you're just starting out your playthrough, then feel free to sit back, relax, and let good old Matt here make your job easier. So the first optional thing we're going to get is going to be right next to the outskirts wall idol. And it's going to be just over in the rooftop of this house here, through the broken opening. You will get the Shuriken Wheel prosthetic. And for your convenience, whenever I show something trophy related, I will always show the closest idol to whatever said thing it is that I'm showing in the footage, so you're welcome for that. Now, normally I don't like to do this. Normally I don't like showing things that you have to get and they essentially cannot be missed because you have to get them in order to progress the game. But I find in Sekiro's case, I'm going to make an exception because I find it's very hard to keep track of how many prayer beads you have, which ones you've obtained, if I skip over ones that you can get. So for all intents and purposes, I'll be showing the mandatory prayer beads as well, just so that we can more easily keep track of them. You could get your first one from this mini-boss here, General Naomori Kawa... You know what? I'm not even going to bother saying their names, because there's going to be a lot of name butchering if I do that. Basically, the way I fought this guy is I just went fucking ham. Whenever he would attack me, I would go to parry or block it, and I would just keep attacking him non-stop. I found that this strategy overwhelms him quite effectively, and leads to a relatively quick and easy kill, netting you your first prayer bead. And he will also give you your first Gourd Seed. Now, once you've gained exactly enough experience for 1 level up, or 1 skill point, if you will, you can actually return to the sculptor at the dilapidated temple, and he will give you your first Shinobi esoteric text for new Shinobi Arts that you can learn in the idol menu. So that's going to be the first one that we get. By returning to the dilapidated temple, we can also give our Gourd Seeds to Emma here, who can upgrade your healing gourd and allow it to have more uses. So you're definitely going to want to do that, because you're going to be healing quite a lot. Next up, continuing along the path, this old lady NPC can be found almost immediately after the spot where we just fought that last mini-boss, so it's relatively close to the idol. Talk to her. It doesn't matter which dialogue you choose. She will end up giving you a bell by the end of the text. And we need this bell in order to access the completely optional area of the Harada Estate. And next up, along that same path that we were following in order to find the NPC, if you actually look towards the left side here, you will notice some grapple points that lead you upward. So we're going to actually make our way up this cliffside, and at the top we will find an NPC. This is a merchant, and he's going to be selling your next Shinobi Prosthetic Tool, which is going to be Robert's Firecrackers. So go ahead and buy that from him. And just before we reach the next sculptor's idol, you will run into an NPC, whom if you talk to, will then ask you to purchase information. For a very small fee, of course. This is absolutely worth it. He does not ask a ridiculous amount from you. and you're going to have to give him money both times. I believe he asks for money twice. And once you do that, he will eventually acquire his own list of goods that he can sell to you, one of which is called the Phantom Kunai, which is an upgrade material that we're going to need in order to get one of the Shinobi prosthetic upgrades. So you will have to purchase this from him eventually. If he's not selling it right away, then progress the story and keep checking back every now and then until he eventually does offer it to you. So make sure to buy this from him as soon as you acquire the funds. So this will be after you've reached the idle outskirts wall stairway, and you'll notice directly up ahead at the top of the stairs you will run into your next mini-boss you'll have to kill, named the Chained Ogre. Now, if you're new to the game, this is going to be a pretty tough fight to learn. As you can see, when the fight starts, you can get a lot of free damage on him, so definitely make use of that. And this was essentially how I fought him the entire time. I would just keep backing off, double dodging backward away from him whenever he would go for an attack, and then I would land a fully charged thrust, and then rinse and repeat that strategy until eventually he died. I found this was a rather effective strategy, but be sure to employ whatever works best for you. And immediately after the Chained Ogre, if we grapple up to the opening in the wall just above you, you will find your next Gourd Seed simply lying on the ground. This one's very hard to miss. And in the very next room, you're going to find a bunch of enemies, but mainly you're going to find our next mini-boss, who can also be stealth hit, which will instantly remove one of his health bars, making the fight much easier. You're most likely not going to be able to land that stealth hit unless you clear out all the other enemies first, and then de-aggro and come back to him. But essentially this was how I fought him as well. I mostly employed the same strategy as before on the Chained Ogre, in combination with using the fireworks. I found this was the most effective way to get free hits in. And of course he's going to give you your next Prayer Bead. And once you reach the Ashina Castle Gate Fortress idol, not long after that, you're going to run into the first big boss of the game, which is going to be Yobu Oniwa. This boss isn't too difficult, so you should be able to make relatively quick work of him. Then you will be granted access to your next idol, the Ashina Castle Gate. Now, instead of going through the gate directly next to the idol, we're instead going to turn around and make your way up the nearby stairs. Doing this, you will find another Memorial Mob NPC who will be selling yet another important item we're going to need, which is going to be your next Gourd Seed. So make sure you don't forget to purchase that from him. And inside the nearby building, you will meet with the NPC Tengu of Ashina. Now this NPC is very important because he's actually the key to getting your next Shinobi Arts. It's worth noting that this is also highly missable. If you progress the game too far, Tengu of Ashina will no longer be here, so you need to make sure that you do this now. Otherwise you'll miss him for the entire playthrough, and you'll be locked out of getting the text. So make sure you don't do that. We're also going to need to accept his side quests, so once he asks you if you want to join him in killing rats, simply accept. Now before we go hunting down those rats, we're actually going to make our way to the very top of this building that we're in. After some simple, straightforward platforming, you will find your next Prayer Bead in the chest at the very top. Making our way back to the Ashina Castle Gate idol, we're actually going to make our way up ever so slightly and grappling hook up onto this rooftop here. From here we can access the rat enemies that the Tengu was talking about. So we're going to find these guys and kill them. You can do this very easily using the axe, the Shinobi Prosthetic Tool. As you can see, it completely renders their defense useless, leading to an easy kill. Once you've killed the rats, return to the Tengu, and he will acknowledge your new achievement and reward you with a very important Ashina esoteric text. So good job on that one. And progressing a little further up ahead, you will run into another mandatory mini-boss that needs to be defeated, the Blazing Bull. Now with this boss, I like to just stay on his left or right side, either side works. He'll very often go for an attack that just whiffs, allowing you to literally combo him for free, which is pretty great. It's also worth noting that the Firecracker Prosthetic Tool is very effective on any animal enemy in the game, so using it on the bull is also a great idea. Once you kill him, you'll get your next Prayer Bead, so good job. And that's going to be it for the Ashina Outskirts area. That is all trophy-relevant loot so far. Now, next up, we could return to the dilapidated temple and pray at the shrine inside, and you can offer the bell that the NPC old lady gave us in order to get to the Harada Estate. Now, when you first reach the Harada Estate, you may notice something very unique located in many of the bodies of water throughout the area. These special guys are called treasure carp, and they can be found in almost every single body of water throughout the game. Now, treasure carp are very important because whenever you slay one, you are rewarded with a treasure carp scale, and these scales are a type of currency that we're going to need for later in the game in order to buy some of the most important items required for obtaining the platinum. So it's very important that whenever you see a treasure carp, that you always do your best to take it out, and gather as many treasure carp scales throughout the game as you can. It's also worth mentioning that many of the treasure carp throughout the game cannot be killed until you acquire the diving ability, which you get after defeating the corrupted monk in Mibu Village. Once you have the diving ability, it would be a good idea to backtrack to previous areas with bodies of water that harbor treasure carp. Honestly, there are way more treasure carp throughout the game than you actually need in order to acquire the items necessary to platinum, so you will have many extra as long as you're being diligent and killing them whenever possible. And treasure carp scales should not be an issue. Do your best to keep up with killing them, and happy hunting. Once you reach the estate path idol, it's a quick walk from here to your next Shinobi Prosthetic Tool. You're going to want to take a right as soon as you are able to, and you will find this house here with a door that can be opened, and inside will be the Shinobi Axe of the Monkey. Once again, from the estate path, we're going to keep making our right. It's actually further to the right from where we got the last prosthetic tool. Eventually you'll see a bunch of enemies surrounding a campfire, much like this one. And just right next to the campfire will be the Flame Barrel Shinobi Prosthetic Tool. And further ahead from the estate path, you will eventually happen upon this mini-boss, who is mandatory. You do have to defeat him in order to progress. As you can see, you could get a nice stealth hit on him, removing one of his health bars, which is nice. Also, you're going to want to have learned the Mikiri counter skill in your skill tree. Using it on this enemy makes the fight extremely easy. Whenever you see him go for the unblockable stab attack, simply dash forward into him. This will raise his posture immensely, making it very easy to break, netting in yet another easy kill, and that'll be your next Prayer Bead. Now from the Bamboo Thicket Slope Idol, which will be immediately after that mini-boss we just killed, we can actually grapple up to the left side here and make our way into this small ravine, and swim to the end of it, and you can grapple up to yet another branch. Go ahead and break the bamboo, blocking your way into this cave. Wall jump all the way to the top, and be careful because there's a very powerful enemy here. I was so annoyed at fighting him that I literally just ignored him and opened this door leading to the Mist Raven's Feathers Shinobi Prosthetic Tool. And making your way further through the Harada Estate, you will eventually happen upon the NPC Owl, and he will reward you with the hidden temple key simply for speaking to him. And by this point, we'll almost be done with this entire area. Once you reach the Harada Estate main hall idol up ahead, you will run into your next mini-boss, who can also be stealth attacked if you simply aggro him and de-aggro him. Once you do start the fight, you can run back towards this NPC and talk to him real fast. And if you do, he will actually help you battle the mini-boss, making it much easier. And basically the strategy here is just keep swapping aggro with the NPC, let him hit the guy, and then when the boss turns around, you hit him, and rinse and repeat, making for a very easy kill. This will give you your next Prayer Bead. And just before you reach the final Sculptor's Idol in the Harada Estate, take a little bit of time to explore these pathways here, and you will eventually come up to this secret passage, which will bring you to a room containing a treasure chest, and that will have your next Prayer Bead that you're going to need, so go ahead and loot that. Now we're going to take a little bit of time to talk about Lady Butterfly, which is going to be the next boss we're going to have to encounter. Now this is going to be the first boss fight that I actually talk about and address, and the reason for this is because Lady Butterfly is technically missable. She is technically an optional boss that you do not have to fight in order to beat the game. So this is me giving you a reminder that you will have to come here and defeat her. It's also worth noting that you will not always have access to this boss if you progress the game far enough. Once you defeat the boss Shinobi Owl later in the story, this boss will no longer be accessible, so you won't be able to fight her after that. So make sure you have defeated her before then. Honestly, this is something you should be looking out to do because she's really not that difficult. She's one of the easier bosses of the game, and defeating her sooner rather than later would be more beneficial to you. And of course, there is a trophy to defeat all bosses in the game, so that is another reason why we're going to be tackling this boss right now. As for the strategy to fighting this boss, I mean, honestly, I fight a lot of enemies in this game the exact same way. It's kind of hard for me to explain a specific strategy, because a lot of the time with these fights, I find they're fights of feeling. Meaning, I fight the boss at my own pace, I see what the boss does, learn their patterns and behaviors, and apply what I've learned. This boss loves to jump around the room and typically rush in at you with a flurry of attacks. Meaning parrying her during these flurries of attacks will do well to increase her posture bar. Once you fight her for long enough and you've learned all of her attacks, this should be relatively simple. However, once you remove her first health bar, she will gain access to a couple new attacks. One of which will be an illusion where she summons several adds in the boss room that will hunt you down and try to attack you. Now this is where snap seeds really come in handy. Using one of these items will immediately dispel any illusions that she has projected forth, thus negating the challenge and difficulty of the attack itself, making the boss fight much easier. Besides that, the only other thing she does in her second phase is she'll occasionally fire these energy projectiles at you that have somewhat decent tracking. But as soon as you see them, if you just make it a point to dodge them and don't take any risks, they're not that difficult to evade. Besides that, you just keep applying the tried and true method that you've discovered thus far, until eventually you will defeat her. So hey, good job! And by the time you've fully completed the Harada Estate, you will now have enough Shinobi Prosthetic Tools, you need 3 minimum, in order for the sculptor to give you your next esoteric text. So you will be rewarded with that once you are fully outfitted. Now, once we finish the Harada Estate, we're going to be continuing through towards Ashina Castle and the next big story progression throughout the game. The first thing you'll notice is a mini-boss directly ahead of you up a flight of stairs. Now, if you take the time to clear out the enemies and get some advantageous positioning, it is possible to land a stealth hit on this mini-boss, and that'll take care of his first health bar. As for how I handled the rest of the fight, I basically would just create distance from my opponent so he couldn't hit me easily, and I would just spam the Ichimonji attack, which is a special skill you can learn. It's an overall excellent attack to be using throughout the entire game. It's one of the best attacks in the game. Spamming it on him makes this boss fight overall pretty easy, netting you your next Prayer Bead. Now, from the Ashina Castle Sculptor's Idol, we can also head directly left from the idol. Across the gap, you will have to grapple over to a tree branch, and eventually you will meet some enemies on a bridge. Killing one of these enemies will net you the Gatehouse Key, which is a unique item we're going to need in order to get our next Shinobi Prosthetic Tool. Very close to where we just were, you can grapple over the gateway and take out this big enemy surrounded by some wolves. This will lead you down the path and over to your next Sculptor's Idol, so you're probably going to want to grab that just so that we have it. You can also find your next Prayer Bead very close by to this location. There will be a memorial mob right next to the idol who will be selling it, so as soon as you acquire the funds, go ahead and purchase that for yourself. And if you just backtrack to the bridge where you got the Gatehouse Key, and then take the path down the ravine just below the bridge, you will come across the Ashina Reservoir. From here, you can make your way to a nearby hut where we will be able to use the newly acquired Gatehouse Key, granting you access to the next Shinobi Prosthetic Tool, Yobu's Broken Horn. It's also worth noting that you should grab this item ASAP because it will eventually become missable and you will be locked out of retrieving it for the rest of the playthrough. So you'll want to grab this ASAP. Further down the path, if you take the same route you did to reach Kuro during the intro prologue of the game, you will notice there's a new mini-boss who wasn't here before. This is the 7 Ashina Spears, and as you can see, he can be stealth attacked. Now, me at the time, I found this enemy to be incredibly intimidating, so I kind of did this little cheese strat where I got him stuck on the staircase, where whenever he would whiff an attack, I would simply retaliate, and he couldn't hit me back most of the time. By employing this strategy, I was able to eventually fill his posture gauge and defeat him, netting you your next Prayer Bead. It's also worth noting that this is one of the few mini-bosses in the game who are entirely missable if you progress the game too far and complete Fountainhead Palace, so you'll want to kill him as soon as possible. Now, from the same area where we acquired the Shinobi Prosthetic Tool, the Gyobu's Horn, next to where we saw the drummer enemy, if you actually take a look across the way, you will notice there's a branch you could grapple to. From this location, there will be a hole that you could drop down into, leading to your next mini-boss encounter. By dropping down onto him, that will easily remove his first health bar, and you'll notice the area that I'm in will most likely look different than it does for you. The reason for this is because I found this mini-boss way later than I should have. By the time I found him, I had access to the Mortal Draw technique, which I used to very easily defeat him. It's also worth noting that this mini-boss is highly missable. Once you clear the area of Fountainhead Palace, you will no longer have access to this mini-boss, so you'll want to defeat him as soon as possible. Next up, from the Ashina Castle Sculptor's Idol, this time we're going to take a right immediately after the door directly in front of you. Following this path will eventually lead you to a somewhat hidden NPC. Now, if there are enemies surrounding the area, he most likely won't talk to you until you've defeated them all. Once you have, talk to him again, and once you're given the prompt, just say yes, and then proceed to exhaust his dialogue. Doing this will cause him to move to the dilapidated temple, and he will become a merchant. Once there, you will be able to purchase the next Gourd Seed from him, so you'll want to do that once you acquire the funds. Now, after some fine grappling skills, making your way upward, following the rooftops, you will eventually happen upon the next Sculptor's Idol, which is going to be the Upper Tower Antechamber. It is here that you will find your next Gourd Seed, which will be in a nearby chest just before the Sculptor's Idol itself, so you can go ahead and loot that for yourself. And further up ahead, in the room with all the wandering samurai, you can make your way to the end of the room and discover a secret hidden passage located directly behind the wall scroll. Inside this room will be your next prayer bead, hidden in a treasure chest, so go ahead and loot that. Making your way upstairs from here, you will reach the Upper Tower Ashina Dojo Sculptor's Idol. In the room directly next to this idol, you will find your next mini-boss, the Ashina Elite. Now, this boss seems very intimidating at first, but he's actually extremely brain-dead easy to kill. He will literally spam the same attack over and over and over. All you need to do is just parry it every time he does it. Simply stand there and wait for him to kill himself, and you will remove his health bars with ease, thus rewarding you with your next prayer bead. So good job. Now, if we make our way back to the room with all the wandering samurai, you can actually drop down all the way to the bottom of the building, and this will actually lead to a room as well as some enemies, but more importantly, it will lead you to the next Shinobi Prosthetic Tool, Wasabi Maru, which can be found in a nearby treasure chest. So go ahead and loot that. And now that we're on the bottom floor, if you simply follow the path outside of the building, you will eventually reach the Old Grave Sculptor's Idol, so you're going to want to go ahead and grab that for yourself. From here, if you make your way down the couple staircases up ahead and follow the path, you will eventually see a house with a rooftop that you could grapple to. On the roof of this house, there will be a hole that you could drop down in order to find a secret merchant. This merchant will be selling your next Shinobi Prosthetic Tool, the Iron Fortress. So once you've acquired the funds, purchase this from him as quickly as possible. Once you reach the very top of the tower, you will encounter your next big story boss fight with Genichiro. Once you do defeat him, however, you will have access to some new areas in the game, although there's a couple things you'll need to do first before we make our way to those areas. From Kuro's room in the upper tower, after you've exhausted his dialogue, you can leave the room via one of the nearby windows and make your way across the rooftops towards the smoke signals. In a very nearby tower, you will meet the NPC Enshin Ashina, so just go ahead and exhaust his dialogue, and once you're finished talking to him, you'll have a better sense of what you're supposed to do next in the game. Once you've finished talking to Enshin, a new area located in Kuro's room will be accessible now, aka the library. You'll find Kuro in this room, as well as the Gunfort Shrine key, and we're going to need this key in order to access one of the next areas up ahead, so don't forget to loot this here. And since we've gone ahead and defeated Lady Butterfly, you should have a unique item called the Sakura Droplet, and if you talk to Kuro, you'll be able to give this item to him, which will reward you with an additional resurrection, which will be very useful when progressing the game further, since the game becomes gradually harder. Having more resurrections is definitely a welcome reward, so you're going to want to nab this. Now I recommend backtracking to the abandoned dungeon Sculptor's Idol that we grabbed before, and making your way through this area. Once you do, you will eventually reach Senpo Temple, Mount Kongo, and this is going to be the next big area we're going to explore. The next Gourd Seed you can find will be located along the pathway that you're supposed to travel in order to progress through the area. So it's very difficult to miss this. You can find it right next to the enemy in the room. Proceeding further, you will eventually reach the Shugendo Sculptor's Idol. From here, if you take a left instead of going the way you're supposed to, you can actually find another memorial mob. And this NPC will be selling an item that we're going to need later for a side quest, so just remember that he's here, and we'll be returning to him later. Proceeding further down the path, you will eventually run into the Armored Warrior. Now this enemy physically cannot be damaged. However, once you've hit him enough times, you'll eventually fill his posture bar. What you want to do then is approach him from behind and make sure he's positioned in a way that when you initially stun him, he'll be standing directly in front of a exposed ledge. Once you perform the execute attack, you will actually end up pushing him off the bridge, thus defeating him. Doing this will reward you with your next Prayer Bead. The next Sculptor's Idol you will reach immediately after the boss fight will be the Temple Grounds Idol. Proceeding along the path, you will eventually reach a downward slope leading to a nearby structure housing the next mini-boss. This will be the Long-Armed Centipede Senun, and since you initially approach him from above, this allows you to easily remove his first health bar. And the key to defeating this boss is to simply let him kill himself. This boss is very spammy, and he doesn't like to leave many windows of opportunity for you to attack him. So simply parry him until he raises his posture bar all the way up, thus killing himself. And the fight is as easy as that. This will net you your next Prayer Bead. And once you've defeated the folding screen monkeys, you are now finished with the Senpo Temple area. At least for now, but we will have to return here later in the game. For now, you can port back to Ashina Castle, specifically the Old Grave. Sculptor's Idol will be closest to the next location. Make your way down the nearby path that's riddled with monkeys, and you'll know you're in the right area. The next Sculptor's Idol will be the Great Serpent Shrine. From here, continue along the path until you reach the Undershrine Valley Sculptor's Idol. From here, turn around directly behind you, and you will find two enemies, whom you could quickly dispatch. Make your way up and scale the nearby mountain wall, and eventually you will reach a nearby lootable item, and this will be your next Prayer Bead that you could go ahead and nab for yourself. And from the opposite direction of the nearby idol, take the path ahead, which will lead you to more enemies as well as more grapple hook points. Navigate your way upward through this area until eventually, next to some nearby enemies, at the highest reachable point of this area, you will find your next Gourd Seed, so you can go ahead and loot that for yourself. Making your way in the opposite direction from the previous idol, you will eventually happen upon the Sunken Valley Sculptor's Idol. From here, once you grapple your way across the chasm, you will eventually happen upon the next mini-boss, Snake Eyes Shirafuji. Now this enemy is quite intimidating, he deals a lot of damage and has a unique moveset that you'll have to learn. But overall, the method I used to defeat this enemy was to mainly rely on creating distance and spamming the Ichimonji attack. I found doing this, I was able to eventually fill his posture bar all the way, and I was able to remove his health bars, thus rewarding you with your next Prayer Bead. From here, you will eventually reach the Gunfort Sculptor's Idol. From here, directly ahead will be your next mini-boss, the Long-Armed Centipede Giraffe. Fucking weird as shit name. But anyways, we fought an enemy just like this back in Senpo Temple, and this one fights no different. He has the exact same moveset. So simply apply the same strategy as before, and let him kill himself by spamming his attack and having you just parry the ever-living shit out of him until eventually he's dead. And this enemy really isn't that difficult, thus rewarding you with your next Prayer Bead. And directly after this enemy, you can go ahead and loot the Large Fan Shinobi Prosthetic Tool, which will literally just be sitting there. And from here, in the exact same room that we defeated the mini-boss, there will be a hole in the ground nearby. Proceeding through this hole and crouching down through the pathways will lead you into an underground chasm. Grappling your way through to the other side of this chasm, you will run into some enemies, but more importantly, you will find your next Prayer Bead simply sitting there on the ground that you could go ahead and loot for yourself. And making your way back to the room with the mini-boss, this will also be where we use the Gunfort Shrine Key that we picked up earlier from the library in Kuro's room. Making your way from here, you will eventually reach the Riven Cave Sculptor's Idol. Making your way all the way down to the poison pools at the very bottom of the ravine up ahead, you will reach another memorial mob. Next to him, there will be a nearby cave. Make your way through this cave until eventually you happen upon the Great Serpent. This will be highly intimidating, but as long as you hug the left wall closest to him, you will eventually happen upon a very frightened monkey. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use the ninjutsu puppeteer on this monkey. Doing so will hire him under your employ to do your bidding. He will make his way up the nearby cliff and grab the snake's attention. Doing this will create an opening for you in order to pass the snake without being killed. As you can see, my timing was a little off and he actually damaged me, but he didn't kill me. So you're going to want to make sure you're at full health for this. Once you've done this, in the nearby room, you will find the dried serpent viscera. This item's not important right now, but it will become very important later on, so it's good to get this out of the way now. And of course, if you're wondering how to exit the room after being trapped in, simply look up for your next grapple point. Doing this will lead you to the Ashina Depths, and you will reach the Poison Pool Sculptor's Idol. It is here that you will encounter your next mini-boss fight, which is going to be Snake Eyes Shurahagi. And if done carefully, you can actually sneak up on this guy and remove his first health bar. Now, it's kind of weird, but my strategy with this guy was simply to just go fucking ham on him. I would attack him constantly, and whenever he traded blows, I would simply parry. And doing this, I was able to remove his next health bar with relative ease. I was honestly surprised it went this well, thus rewarding you your next Prayer Bead. Now from here, your next Prayer Bead will be within sight, but not immediate reach. It will be at the very top of one of the nearby monk statues in the poison pool. So what we're going to do is we're going to make our way down the path and look for a nearby grapple point right above you. Follow this path until you notice another area above you that you could jump up to. If you reach the monkey in front of the giant hole, you've gone too far. Reaching this next location, you will now have access to grapple up to the top of the statue's head, thus rewarding you with your next Prayer Bead. Making your way back through the Poison Pool Ravine before you reach the snake, and reaching the end of this path will lead you to the Bodhisattva Valley. And this will be the closest sculptor's idol to the next main story boss, which is going to be the Guardian Ape. You have to defeat this boss in order to advance the story, and doing so will reward you with your next Shinobi Prosthetic Tool, which is going to be the Slender Finger. And immediately following this boss's death, if you proceed to the nearby room up ahead, in a small cave, you will find the key item, the Lotus of the Palace. And you are going to need this item, so go ahead and loot it. Once you've defeated the Guardian Ape, you can now make your way back to the Ashina Depths poison pools that we had previously reached before. Doing so in this large cave, you will be able to rematch the boss we defeated earlier, the Guardian Ape. However, this time he will already be in his second phase. This will seem incredibly intimidating, but don't worry, he's a much easier boss than his original counterpart, dealing overall less damage and having overall less maximum health. So basically he dies a lot quicker this time around. However, this boss fight does differ from the original in one major way. Once you deplete the first health bar of the Guardian Ape, he will call in his female better half in order to assist him, thus changing the dynamic of this fight dramatically. You will now be fighting two apes at the same time. However, upon this new ape's recent arrival, you will notice this one has even less health than the original Guardian Ape, thus making it very easy to kill rather quickly. Doing so is easier said than done, but once you do, it'll make fighting the initial Guardian Ape much easier, and once you have him alone, finish him off with your tried and true strategy, and doing so will net you not one, but 2 additional Prayer Beads for your collection. So congratulations and good job. Next up, you will reach the Hidden Forest Sculptor's Idol, just further up ahead. From here, make your way through the Misty Forest, and watch out for a grapple point above you. Taking this grapple will lead you to your next mini-boss, and if done correctly, you can actually land a stealth blow on him, thus removing his first health bar. As for how I defeated him, I simply employed a straightforward hit-and-run strategy here. Every time he'd go for a hit, I'd back off, and whenever he'd whiff, I'd run in and attack. And I did this until his last health bar was depleted, thus rewarding you your next Prayer Bead. And from here, making your way to the nearby rooftop of the central building, you can drop down and kill the Mist Noble, thus granting you access to the next area of Mibu Village. From here, along the main path, you will notice a nearby tree that stands out from all the others. Next to this tree, there will be some loot on the ground surrounding it, one of which will be your next Gourd Seed, so go ahead and loot that for yourself. And once you've reached the right side of the lake itself, in the center of Mibu Village, make your way down this nearby path, and you will happen upon the key item, Pine Resin Ember, which you're going to need in order to upgrade one of your Shinobi prosthetic tools in the future. Eventually up ahead, continuing down the path, you will reach the Watermill Sculptor's Idol. It's from here that just a little further on you will run into a unique NPC that you can talk to. I don't think the dialogue choices here actually matter, because I'm pretty sure engaging in combat with this enemy is unavoidable. This will actually be your next mini-boss in disguise, O-Rin of the Water. Now, the trick with this mini-boss is that she could very easily be defeated using the Wasabi Maru Prosthetic Tool, which I highly recommend using on her. As you can see, it absolutely shreds her posture bar, thus killing her in literally seconds. If you use this strategy, and use it well, you will utterly annihilate this boss, thus rewarding you with your next Prayer Bead. And the last item we could find before the next big boss fight of the area will be on the rooftop of the final house in the village, just before the boss fight. Dropping in through a hole on the roof will lead you to your next Prayer Bead, and it will simply be sitting there, awaiting you to loot it. And next up is going to be the boss fight in Mibu Village, named the Corrupted Monk. Now, the thing about this boss is that he's not actually too difficult. However, when you defeat this boss, you will reach one of the cutoff points of the game. Some of the previous mini-bosses that could be found in Ashina Castle will despawn and be replaced with new ones. Either way, this is a friendly reminder to say that if you did miss anything up to this point, now would be a good time to go backtrack and get whatever you missed. And just make sure that you're completely up to date with all collectibles, just so that you don't get unintentionally fucked over. Now, once you defeat the Corrupted Monk, you will gain the ability to dive, which allows you to swim in under any body of water in the game. You also have an infinite air supply, so you never have to come up for air, which is pretty fucking sweet. However, the first thing we're going to be doing with this newfound ability is returning to Mibu Village and jumping straight into the lake in the center of the village. At the bottom of this lake, you could find a treasure chest closest to the entrance of Mibu Village, and this chest will contain your very next Prayer Bead. Next up, we're going to be returning to Senpo Temple, Mount Congo. And as it turns out, I actually saw this cave originally on my first way through this level. However, I randomly got distracted and forgot all about it, and so I'm backtracking now to go get the combat-style temple arts that I originally missed. And yes, I could have edited this earlier into the video from when I was first in Senpo Temple to make it more convenient on you guys, but I'm only human, I'm not perfect. What are you gonna do, sue me? You could go back and get it now like I did, and you'll sit there and like it. Anyways, that's the next combat style. And now, by returning back to Ashina Castle, the first new mini-boss we could find will be at the bottom of the tower. And if you want to do what I did here in the footage, I used a clever little tactic to make use of my brand new ninjutsu we got, which you can easily activate off of that enemy at the top of the tower, and then immediately once you drop down, just go to town on the Chained Ogre. He's no different than the original Chained Ogre that we fought way back in the Ashina Outskirts at the beginning of the game. He has the exact same moveset and behavior. You learned how to fight him then, you should easily be able to defeat him now, especially given the fact that we're only stronger and we have a plethora of new abilities and weapons. So that being said, you should be able to make quick work of this mini-boss, no problem, and he will give you your very next Prayer Bead upon defeating him. And just before you reach the top of Ashina Castle, one floor down, you can actually make your way into the window, and I believe this is the same room where the mini-boss, the Ashina Elite, was. He will now be replaced with a new mini-boss called Lone Shadow Vilehand, and this fight can be a bit of a bitch. For one, as soon as you enter this fight, you are trapped in the room and you cannot leave. And for two, you have to fight two enemies at the same time. One mini-boss and one regular ninja guy. And these enemies are a bit of a prick to fight, so fighting two at once can be hell. Luckily, it was only because I had as many Gourd Seeds as I did that I was able to last throughout this entire fight. My strategy in this fight was just to constantly run around the room and wait for an opportunity to attack. I would go for the weaker enemy first, since the boss is much harder to kill and I could get rid of him quicker. Whenever I had a chance to sneak in and attack, I would always use the Mortal Draw as my go-to choice. I found this strategy worked pretty well when I wasn't getting my shit kicked in. Suffice it to say, this fight is going to be a challenge no matter how you slice it. And if you can manage to defeat this very challenging fight, you will be rewarded with your next Prayer Bead. And the last new mini-boss that has spawned just outside of Ashina Castle is going to be the Lone Shadow Masanaga the Spear Bearer. And you can find him where the Great Serpent Shrine idol used to be. It'll be deactivated now, so you'll have to kill him to get it back. But this was the direction we went just before getting to the Gun Fort. So you could start off this fight by landing a stealth hit pretty easily. For this boss, I used a pretty simple tactic to just keep creating distance, and whenever I saw an opportunity, I would hit him with the Mortal Draw, which should net in a quick and easy kill, earning you your next Prayer Bead. And now that we've taken out all the brand new mini-bosses that have spawned in the area, we can now make the next big step in the storyline to make your way to the very top of Ashina Castle, watch the cutscene, and then speak with Owl. Once he shuts the hell up, eventually he's going to force you into an ultimatum. Out of the two choices of dialogue, it's very important that you pick the second one, aka break the Iron Code, stay loyal to Kuro. Do not, under any circumstances, pick the first option. If you pick the first option, it'll force you into one of the endings of the game, and after a little bit more playtime, eventually the game will just immediately end. And you'll miss a shit ton of stuff, so do not do that. We are going to have to pick the other option on New Game Plus, however, so just keep that in mind. But for now, stick with the second option so that we can actually enjoy the rest of the game. Then you're going to get into a big epic fight with your daddy, yada yada yada. Once you do that, you can now talk to Kuro. Now it's at this point we can actually start taking steps to unlocking the other endings in the game. The first of which we're going to be working towards is the Purification ending. So exhaust Kuro's dialogue as much as possible. Talk to him as many times as you physically can until he stops giving you new dialogue. At this point, you should be able to creep up behind the wall that Kuro's facing, and you should be able to eavesdrop on him. If you don't have the option to eavesdrop, then try fast traveling and coming back. Once you do this, you should have some more dialogue with Kuro, so go ahead and listen to it if you want, or skip through it, I don't really give a shit. And then once you've done this again, you should be able to eavesdrop on him yet again. Once you see this exact dialogue, you should be able to advance the side quest. It's at this point that Emma, the doctor, who usually upgrades your gourd, will move up the flight of stairs just above Kuro's room. Again, if she's not in this position, then feel free to fast travel and come back until she is. Speak with her and tell her that you agree Kuro cannot be allowed to die. Once you do this, exhaust the rest of her dialogue and go ahead and fast travel and come back. Once you do, Emma will have brand new dialogue for you and she'll give you a note. She will also go off on her own to get more information. So make your way to the old grave, Sculptor's Idol, and you'll find her near a tombstone. Go ahead and exhaust her dialogue once again, and then make your way to the dilapidated temple. You will find her here speaking to the sculptor. If you sneak up behind the sculptor's house, there's actually a position in which you can eavesdrop on their conversation. Once you finish eavesdropping, feel free to go ahead and confront Emma, and bring up the topic on what you heard. Then go ahead and ask her what she's hiding, and she will eventually give you the Father's Bell charm. Now it's worth noting that once you get this item, you will be able to offer it to the Buddha, and you will have access to a brand new version of the Harada Estate. Now it's worth mentioning that the old version of the Harada Estate will be completely overridden, meaning some of the things that were exclusive to the first version of the Harada Estate will disappear, aka the Lady Butterfly boss fight, among some other things. All the treasure carp in the area will also reset as well. So if you want to go back and grab whatever you need from the first version of the Harada Estate, now's the time to do it, because once you get the new version, you can't go back to the old one. And after exhausting all our dialogue with Kuro, we can now visit the divine realm of Fountainhead Palace. So go ahead and pray at the altar, and then make your way to the first Sculptor's Idol, which is going to be Fountainhead Palace. Now, as soon as you reach the new version of the Harada Estate, you will immediately be confronted with a new mini-boss. You'll recognize his name, the Lone Shadow Masanaga the Spear Bearer. Yes, we already killed this guy, but because the Harada Estate is actually a memory of the past, we can kill him again! What fun! However, this version of his fight is much harder, because he keeps summoning those darned wolves, and they fight alongside him the entire time. And of course, fighting multiple enemies in any of the From Software games is a recipe for disaster. However, there is one little neat trick you can employ to make this fight easier. If memory serves, he will always summon up to 3 wolves. But as long as you don't kill all 3, he won't summon new ones. So just kill 2 of the wolves and let one of them roam free. That way you'll only have to deal with 1 wolf instead of 3. Yes, you're still fighting more than one enemy at once, but this is a way to mitigate the difficulty. Besides that, you can fight him exactly the same as you normally would with the previous version of him, thus rewarding you with your next Prayer Bead. Now, it was around this time that I actually had enough treasure carp scales to spend a total of 7 at the treasure carp merchant, Pot Noble Harunaga. Once you spend 7 treasure carp scales on him, you will be offered the option to talk to him. Go ahead and do that and exhaust his dialogue, and he'll let you know about his great ambition to become a magnificent carp. Once you exhaust all his dialogue, he will end up giving you the truly precious bait, which is a key item we're going to need for later. So go ahead and hold on to that. It's also worth noting that he won't actually offer this dialogue unless you have visited the Divine Realm of Fountainhead Palace. So make sure you do that before you talk to him. And continuing forward through the Harada Estate, we're actually going to run into another familiar face, Juzo the Drunkard. So you'll recognize this guy because we fought him last time. And of course we could start this fight with a stealth attack the exact same way we did before, thus removing his first health bar. And my strategy has changed since last time we had the NPC to help us. This time we're doing it solo. This was quite literally the epitome of a hit and run tactic, as you could see. I would never take the time to do more than one hit, and I would just back off every time. And once he's defeated, that will net you your next Prayer Bead. And once you reach the end of the Harada Estate, in the same room where the Lady Butterfly boss fight could be found, you will be met with one of the absolute most difficult bosses in the game, Owl. And yes, we've already fought Owl before, however this fight is a lot harder. He has brand new moves and attacks that you will have to learn, and it's worth noting that this boss is extremely difficult, and it's my personal recommendation that you save this boss for as late as you possibly can. Ideally, you would have every single prayer bead in the game before you challenge him, because trust me when I say it makes the boss fight a hell of a lot easier. However, since we're already at the boss fight, I might as well cover it now for when you actually are ready to tackle it. The main thing you really want to keep your eye out for in this first phase of the boss fight is when he does the Firecrackers. He also has pretty quick unblockable attacks that you want to watch out for. You can't really punish him on the same stuff as before, but there are obvious tells, like when he does that highly telegraphed sword slam. That's a move where you can easily punish him after. But this fight is very fast-paced, so you really want to be on your toes. Constantly watch for what he's doing. Don't just go ham on him and throw caution to the wind. Really take the time to learn the pattern, learn his entire moveset, know what can be dodged, how to dodge it, and look out for which moves you can punish him on. Hopefully with this footage you can get somewhat of a sense of how to fight him. As you can see, the Mortal Draw is a fantastic attack for him, and you should be able to get through his first health bar without too much trouble. However, once the second phase starts, he has even more new attacks, mainly with a Spirit Owl that he likes to combo with. And whenever this owl is flying around, you really want to be mindful to what it's doing. Make sure to create distance whenever necessary. Typically, if you want to play it safe, just don't ever do anything to him when the owl is around. But as you can see, the owl's attacks aren't too difficult to dodge. I would say his most lethal attack that you will always want to watch out for are the Firecrackers. So I would really just recommend watching out for that move like a hawk. Whenever he does it, give Owl a wide berth, and with a little luck, you will eventually defeat this very difficult boss. And we're going to be continuing to make our way through Fountainhead Palace. Immediately after the first Sculptor's Idol that we picked up, you will be met with a boss fight, which will be a rematch with the Corrupted Monk, but a much harder version of him. And as you continue on through Fountainhead Palace, this will be quite a ways through the level. You will eventually happen upon the Flower Viewing Stage Sculptor's Idol. From here, we can take the time to find some pretty useful stuff. If you come up to this rooftop here, directly below the rooftop is a hole where we could swim and dive under into a secret room that can only be accessed this way. And in this room, which is pretty fucking nice, you could find 3 treasure carp scales. So if you're light on scales, Fountainhead Palace is a great location to gather many of this item. And it's worth noting that by this point, I was actually able to master every single art in a combat style. So it's around this time that if you actually make your way back to Enshin and talk to him once you've accomplished this, he will actually give you the final combat style that we've been looking for, which will be the Mushin Arts. Now, later on, as you progress through the game in the story, Enshin will actually pass away after a certain point. So if you have reached this point in the game before mastering any of the combat styles, simply talking to Emma will also grant you the Mushin Arts esoteric text. So those are the 2 different ways that you can get the final combat art. And so now it is at this point that we can actually start working towards completing the requirements for the return ending, which is something we're going to have to do because we need every ending in the game in order to platinum. You could start off with the first step by paying a visit to the Divine Child. This is the same woman who gave you the Mortal Blade. If you simply speak with her and exhaust her dialogue, she will give you rice. Now, when she gives you rice, you have to actually go into your inventory and eat it. It's a consumable. And once you do this, if you fast travel away and then come back, you could be given rice yet again. Repeat this 3 times in total, and then pay a final visit to the Divine Child, and you will find that your greedy nature has caused her to fall ill. She requests but one thing of you, which is a persimmon. Now, if we make our way back to the Shugendo Sculptor's Idol, we can visit the nearby memorial mob, and he will be selling the persimmon for a very low asking price. So go ahead and purchase one from him, and then return to the Divine Child and give her the persimmon, you greedy animal. And shame on you for causing the Divine Child any harm. But of course, bless her sweet heart, she is so thankful for this that she ends up giving you rice once again. Except this time, she will actually give you a little bit of extra rice for Kuro. So now we can return to Kuro and exhaust his dialogue. This will end up giving him the rice, and he will say that he is going to make something out of it. It is now that you can fast travel away and then return to Kuro, and talking to him will yield the sweet rice ball that Kuro has now made for you. So go ahead and go into your inventory and eat it. This will trigger some more dialogue between you and Kuro. And then return to the Divine Child and tell her about the tasty treat that Kuro made for you using her wonderful rice. Exhausting her dialogue, she will now task you with finding a certain hidden text. You can now return to the Temple Ground Sculptor's Idol and go ahead and jump into the nearby pond. And now, since we have the diving ability, we can actually dive into this body of water, and you will find the holy chapter infested that the Divine Child had requested of you. It's also worth noting that in this same pond, you can actually find your next prayer bead further into the underwater cave, so you could go ahead and gather that for yourself. Now return to the Divine Child and give her the holy chapter. It's at this point, if you fast travel away and come back, you will find that the Divine Child has now vanished. So go ahead and make your way back to the Halls of Illusion, where we fought the folding screen monkeys, and you could find the Divine Child here meditating. Go ahead and exhaust her dialogue, and she will now task you with finding yet another text. So you can now fast travel to the main hall idol, and then make your way just outside the building and into the nearby cave. Making your way through this cave, you will encounter some easy to kill enemies, and soon after that, you will find the body of the monk that the Divine Child tasked you with finding, and he will be holding the holy chapter, Dragon's Return. Go ahead and return to the Divine Child and give her the text that you found, and of course exhaust her dialogue. She will now tell you about 2 unique persimmon-like items that you will now be tasked with finding. If you remember, we already got the first one she mentioned, which is the dried serpent viscera. If you want a reminder on how to get this item, refer to the timestamps in the description. It's at this point that we can now return to the Senpo Temple Mount Kongo Sculptor's Idol, and simply make our way down the cliffside, and eventually you will run into this lonely enemy who could actually be easily snuck up on and puppeteered. So you'll want to use the puppeteer ninjutsu, and this will cause the enemy to go ahead and man the kite. It's at this point that you'll now have to make your way further into the level. Go ahead and climb up the nearby tree, and from here, you'll actually have a vantage point to grapple and swing from the kite. It's also worth noting that you should not fast travel to this location, because doing so will reset the puppeteered enemy. So you'll have to run here immediately after taking control of it. Simply follow the path down the cliffside and make your way across the chasm. Once you reach the end of the path, you'll find another sculptor's idol, but more importantly, just after this sculptor's idol, you will find a massive ravine, and immediately just below you, you will find the Great Serpent. It's at this point that we can now slay the Great Serpent, so if you simply jump off onto his head and perform the finishing move, the execution, this will reward you with the fresh serpent viscera. And it's also worth mentioning that if you drop down into the lake just below where we killed the Great Serpent, you can actually find another treasure carp. Now, if we go ahead and return to the Divine Air, you can go ahead and give her both the dried and fresh serpent visceras, and it's at this point that she will ask you to leave because she doesn't want you to witness the horrifying act of consuming them. So if you fast travel away and return, you can actually hear the Divine Child writhing in pain beyond the door, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. And then fast traveling away and returning to her once again, you can now speak to her to find that she has lost her sight. But it's at this point that exhausting her dialogue will now reward you with Frozen Tears. And once you've acquired this item, you will now have everything you need in order to get the return ending. So that's all the setup completed for that one, and we can now move on with the rest of the game. So now we're going to be traveling back to Fountainhead Palace at the Flower Viewing Sculptor's Idol. Just nearby, if you travel alongside the wall of the building, you will eventually run into the Sakura Bull of the palace. Now this bull has the exact same moveset as the previous bull that we fought earlier in the game, so you could utilize the exact same strategy in order to defeat it. If you stay close to its left or right side, it will literally always whiff its attack. You could use this in combination with fireworks in order to defeat it very quickly, and doing so will reward you with your next Prayer Bead. And continuing to make your way through Fountainhead Palace, you will eventually reach the Great Sakura Sculptor's Idol. It's here that you will run into the Okami leader Shizu. This is the dickhead who's been firing lightning bolts at you, preventing you from swimming in the lake. And thankfully, this enemy only has the 1 health bar, and he dies extremely quickly, so he is very easy to defeat. And doing so will reward you with your next Prayer Bead. And you can now freely swim throughout the lake without any danger of being shocked. Swimming around the lake will also reward you with precious bait, and these will end up being important later in order to get more treasure carp scales, so make sure you hold on to these. And swimming down to the very bottom of the lake will reward you with not only more treasure carp scales, but also your very next Prayer Bead. However, be warned, there are headless in this lake, and they can be quite treacherous, so do your best to avoid them. Or kill them if you want. And once you swim your way far enough through the lake, and make your way past the giant carp, you will eventually happen upon the palace grounds, Sculptor's Idol. Making your way into the building nearby, and following the immediate path before you, you will happen upon another treasure chest, which will be containing the final and much sought after Gourd Seed. And making your way to the very top of Fountainhead Palace, after happening upon the Sanctuary Sculptor's Idol, you could be met with your very next boss fight, the Old Dragons of the Tree. And they'll all be very sickly, and you could go ahead and have a laugh at their expense. These enemies aren't too difficult, but once you defeat them, that will mark the end of the first phase, and then the real fight begins against the Divine Dragon. Now, this boss fight is more platforming than anything, and honestly, this boss is really not that difficult. Utilize the catch lightning technique that we learned much earlier in the game, and eventually you will be able to defeat the Divine Dragon, and once you do, you will be rewarded with the gracious gift of tears, and the Fountainhead Palace will now be completed. It's also worth mentioning that defeating the Divine Dragon will trigger events in Ashina Castle that cannot be reversed, and some mini-bosses that were in the area before will permanently despawn for the rest of the playthrough, so make sure that you go back and get any prayer beads that you might have missed before doing this. This is your final warning. Now, from the Palace Grounds Idol, if you make your way to the other side of the house closest to where we looted the Gourd Seed, you'll notice a grapple point that could take you up to the roof. Follow the left side of the roof for more grapple points, leading you to a confined section of the Fountainhead Palace. Eventually, you'll come to the Feeding Grounds Sculptor's Idol. Once there, you can now interact with the giant carp. Ringing the bell will summon him to greet you. Now, you should have two options at this point. You can either feed him precious bait or the truly precious bait. It is very important that you do not feed him the truly precious bait until you have fed him as much precious bait as possible. Feeding him precious bait will reward you with more treasure carp scales if you talk to the NPC nearby afterwards. So make sure you use up as much of your precious bait as possible to get as many scales as you can. Once you're content with feeding the carp all of your precious bait, then he has officially served his purpose, and now you can feed him the truly precious bait. This is a warning. Feeding him the truly precious bait will cause his death. So that's why it's important that you do everything you need to do with the giant carp beforehand. After feeding him the truly precious bait, you can fast travel back to where we fought the Guardian Ape boss in the Sunken Valley, and you will find the corpse of the giant carp here. Go ahead and loot the item next to him, which is the White Whisker. Now, if you return to the Harada Estate and head over to visit the NPC who originally gave you the truly precious bait, you will find that his lifelong dream has come to fruition. He is now a carp. But more importantly, you will now not only be rewarded with your first piece of Lapis Lazuli, but he will also have upgraded his stock for sale. He will now be selling 2 more pieces of Lapis Lazuli. And Lapis is very important, and we need all of it that we can get in order to platinum. So this is why I stressed in the past that it was very important to be collecting as many treasure carp scales as possible, because now is when you need them the most. So go ahead and buy the 2 pieces of Lapis Lazuli from him, and we can now start using those to fully upgrade our Shinobi prosthetic tools. And now that we have completely finished the Fountainhead Palace area, returning to Ashina Castle, you will now notice that more mini-bosses have spawned. The first of which we're going to be tackling is the Ashina Elite Ujinari Mizuo. He could be found in the room directly beneath where Enshin of Ashina was staying. You could start off, of course, by landing a stealth blow, removing the first health bar. This Ashina Elite fights exactly like the one we fought previously in the game. And if you remember, that Ashina Elite was equally as brain damaged as this one. He will literally just keep spamming the exact same attack over and over and over. So if you just parry in response, he will literally kill himself, and he'll do all the work for you. Once he's defeated, you can lay claim to your next Prayer Bead. And of course, further into the Ashina outskirts, we could backtrack there via a newly built bridge just across the way from the old grave sculptor's idol. And making your way over, you will notice a brand new mini-boss has spawned in this location, Shigekichi of the Red Guard. And yes, you could start off this fight by landing a stealth blow, removing his first health bar. Now, the way I like to play this fight out is this enemy just loves to buff himself, and he'll take the time to stop and put a weapon buff on his sword very often. Whenever he does this, it's a prime opportunity to damage him. And I would basically just employ a hit and run strategy and always run up and hit him whenever he would do this. It's a slow process, but eventually it leads to a clean kill, thus rewarding you with your next Prayer Bead. And the very last Prayer Bead in the game can be found at the Ashina Reservoir. You'll have to backtrack and get the Sculptor's Idols again, but once you do, you could find 7 Ashina Spears, Shumei Masaji Oniwa. And the way I did this fight, I took a unique strategy and approach. I actually snuck up on the guy who's right next to him and used the ninjutsu to puppeteer him and have him fight at my side. I found this very easily was able to remove the first health bar of the mini-boss, although he doesn't last forever. If he pulls aggro enough, eventually the mini-boss is just going to take him out. Once this happens, for his second health bar, I made great use of the tree trunk hanging off the side of the ledge nearby. If you stand as far back across the tree trunk as possible, he simply can't reach you. So you could use this tree trunk in order to employ a hit and run method and simply retaliate when he's open. Doing this should net you with a relatively easy kill, as well as the final and much sought after Prayer Bead. So now your vitality will be completely maxed out, which is excellent, and it's going to help a lot with the final bosses of the game. Now that's going to be every single mini-boss in the game that can reward you with a Prayer Bead. However, there are still some very unique mini-bosses throughout the game that we can go and hunt down for very useful items. Some of which are really good to have, and others we absolutely need. These are going to be the Shechiman Warriors, and there are a total of 3 of them throughout the game. This one can be found in the abandoned dungeon. They all fight exactly the same, however there's a trick to defeating these guys. You'll have to use the consumable item, Divine Confetti, in order to be able to significantly damage them. This will apply a weapon buff to your sword, which greatly increases the damage dealt to them. And what's really nice about the anti-air death blow text that we bought from the merchant way earlier in the game is it's really helpful on this guy. Whenever he jumps, you can jump in response and instantly take off one of his health bars. It's really satisfying to do. However, other than that, with your maxed out vitality and posture, it should be extremely easy to literally just go ham on these guys. You could literally just run up to them and just go crazy. And this strategy is relatively all you need to employ. They die pretty darn quickly. And yes, they deal a lot of damage, but they don't have a lot of time to do it. The only thing to really know is that every time you deal enough damage and they block you, they will always disappear to the opposite side of the room. So as soon as you see them do this, you should immediately start running to their next location. And they will always follow up the teleport with a beam attack. But if you get there in time, they won't be able to land it on you. And you could just continue to go crazy, thus netting in a relatively easy kill. And honestly, I fight all the Shichiman Warriors exactly the same way. And once you defeat him, you will be rewarded with the Ceremonial Tanto. Now this item isn't actually needed for any trophies. However, it's an extremely useful tool, and we'll talk more about that later in the video, but I highly recommend going to grab this. It's a very good item. The next Shichiman Warrior, as I'm sure you've noticed, can be found in Fountainhead Palace. These guys are awfully easy to spot. And like I said, the battle goes pretty much exactly the same way. You just keep running to where he teleports and just going ham on him. This should net in a quick kill, and once you defeat him, he will reward you with a piece of Lapis Lazuli, which we need to fully upgrade our Shinobi prosthetic tools. So it's really important that you go and grab this. And the final Shechiman Warrior can be found in the same room where we fought the Guardian Ape for the second time, over in the Poison Pools. Employ the exact same strategy that we used the first 2 times, and this enemy shouldn't prove that difficult for you. Upon defeat, he will reward you with the Malcontents Ring, which is an item we need in order to upgrade our Shinobi prosthetic tool. So it's very important that we come and grab this. And next up, I'm going to talk about the final secret optional boss in the game that we will have to defeat, named the Demon of Hatred. Now, this is easily one of the most difficult bosses to defeat in the game, and he's sporting a massive 3 health bars at that. He can be found at the very end of the Ashina outskirts if you follow the path all the way down and click on the idol. You will be warped to his location. Now, this fight is very long, pretty damn difficult, and it's got 3 separate phases, which will require a lot of time and effort for you to practice and learn exactly how to defeat him. I myself am a very impatient man, and I really didn't want to put up with this boss's bullshit. So instead, I decided to cheese him, and you could do so with a fairly consistent strategy. And it works almost every single time, as long as it is performed correctly and step by step. And yes, I can verify this strategy still works to this day, and it has not been patched out. So basically, as soon as you run into the same room with the boss, he's going to aggro to you pretty quickly. So you're just going to want to hug the left side of the wall, all the way over to the cliff side, and lead him there. Try to get him as far to the back corner of the cliff as possible. And then what you want to do is beeline directly towards the tree that could be found closest to the gateway, and run past it as fast as you possibly can, while still hugging the wall as you run. If done correctly, as you could see, the Demon of Hatred will be completely stuck on the other side of the wall, and as long as you don't walk too far away from this location, he will never be able to get out. He will remain stuck there, and he'll never be able to get past the tree. Now, as long as the Demon of Hatred hasn't destroyed this tower here, then you can employ the strategy very easily. What you're going to want to do is sprint towards the tower, closest to its left side, and double jump to the top, thus grabbing the ledge. And you could do this again, making your way to the very top of the tower. The hitbox to grab the ledge is a little bit tight. However, as long as you perform a running start before you jump, you should be able to make it no problem. Now comes the most difficult part. Once you remain solidly at the very top of the tower, you're going to want to make a running leap towards the wall across from you. And this jump has to be a frame pixel perfect jump. You'll notice here in the footage that I jump at the very last possible second. I wait so late to jump that it almost looks like I've fallen off the tower completely. However, I still get the jump off. That's how you'll know that you've done the jump correctly. And at the end of your leap, remember to grab the ledge of the nearby wall. Once you do this, the cheese strategy will officially be complete, and the next step is very easy. Simply head to the very far back right side closest towards the boss. Once you've done this, the boss will simply walk off the level and kill himself, thus skipping the entire boss fight. And you will be rewarded with 2 more pieces of Lapis Lazuli. So excellent job on defeating this boss with an absolutely amazing cheese strategy. And now, upon defeating the Demon of Hatred, we have officially acquired as much Lapis Lazuli as you possibly can in one playthrough. However, if you'll notice, this isn't actually enough Lapis Lazuli to finish upgrading all of the Shinobi prosthetic tools. So we're actually going to have to get the rest of the Lapis over on New Game Plus. However, now you know how to very easily acquire all of it, so this should be no problem. And with that, we have officially done all optional content and gathered all possible collectibles that we need for trophies throughout our first playthrough. So now I'd say we could finally go ahead and finish the game. The final boss can be found at the Ashina Reservoir, where we first fought Genichiro at the very start of the game. If you don't have the key to get through this door, simply speak with Emma back at Ashina Castle and she'll give you the key. Now, the final boss, funny enough, is probably considered the hardest boss fight in the entire game, even harder than the optional bosses. And the reason for this is because it is a 4-phase fight. This fight is longer than any boss fight in the entire game. The first fight is against Genichiro, and I'm going to explain exactly the strategy to employ in order to defeat the final boss with the least amount of effort. Since this boss is so incredibly difficult, I figure most people are going to want some help and a strategy to employ in order to defeat him. So, that being said, to that end, I'll be explaining how to beat the final boss right now. So the boss fight starts with you having a rematch against Genichiro, and you should know this boss inside and out by now. He's not very difficult, and this is definitely the easiest part of the boss fight. You only have to remove one health bar. The only difference with this Genichiro fight as opposed to the others is that he now has his own version of the Mortal Draw attack. So that's the only thing you really need to watch out for. Besides that, he's the exact same boss as before. Basically just going ham on him as well as timing your parries whenever he retaliates should net you in a quick and easy kill. Now is where the difficulty ramps up quite a bit. The true final boss will now reveal himself after the death of Genichiro, Enshin the Sword Saint. Now with this first part of the boss fight, I simply only do one thing to remove his entire health bar. I spend the entire time during this phase simply running away from him, and I continue to run until I see him perform one attack. He will always start off this attack with a running start, and he will just run into a particular direction. At the end of this run, he will proceed to lunge directly toward you, following it up with 3 consecutive sword swings. This attack is slow, very long and drawn out, and it's very easy to punish him at the end of this, which I always do with a forward thrust. And that is all I do for the entire first phase of the fight. I just keep waiting for him to do that attack and then thrusting in response. I try to take as few risks as possible. I don't want to get too crazy and take too much damage, because we need all the health we can get for the next 2 phases. Yes, this is tedious and it takes a while, but it's a surefire way of getting the job done with minimal effort. Now comes the second phase of the fight, and this is where things get much more difficult. Enshin will now be wielding a large lance as well as a rapid-fire pistol, and his moveset will change drastically. Now, similar to the first phase of the fight, I continuously keep running away from him, always making sure there's a great distance between us. Doing this will condition Enshin to most of the time always use the exact same attack. The attack we're looking for is when he runs directly towards you, firing his pistol. He will always follow it up with a melee attack afterwards. Now, with the Iron Fortress Shinobi Prosthetic Tool, you could simply raise your shield and deflect all of the incoming bullets, and then wait for that melee attack to be thrown out. Once you see it, that is your perfect opportunity to counterattack. Now, in order to execute the counterattack using the loaded umbrella, you will need to learn the skill called Projected Force, which you can learn from the Prosthetic Arts skill tree. So it's very important that you've learned this ability before tackling this boss fight, because it really is the key to defeating him. This exact same strategy can also be done whenever Enshin leaps towards you, following up with the gunplay afterwards. Simply continue to use this tried and true method of baiting out his attacks and then punishing them afterward. Now, using this strategy is highly effective, and you will easily be able to whittle down his entire health bar just using this strategy alone. However, it's worth noting that it does eat up quite a lot of spirit emblems, and that's where the Ceremonial Tanto comes in real handy. Once you run out of spirit emblems and you're no longer able to use the loaded umbrella, you'll want to use the Ceremonial Tanto, which will sacrifice your health in exchange for more spirit emblems, allowing you to continue this strategy. And it's actually really important to do this, because even if you enter this fight with full spirit emblems, you won't have enough to get by on this strategy alone, because the boss fight is simply too long. The Ceremonial Tanto truly is the key to consistently employ this strategy throughout the entire boss fight. This is also why we worked very hard to not use any health during the first 2 phases of the fight, because we need as much of it as possible to not only survive, but also as payment for the Ceremonial Tanto. As I stated previously in the video, the Tanto can be rewarded to you upon defeating the Shechiman Warrior located in the abandoned dungeon. By relying on this tactic alone, you should be able to make your way to the final phase of the boss fight. And with the final phase, nothing has really changed about the boss other than the fact that he'll start using lightning attacks. They have a massive hitbox, and they cover much distance, so you'll want to steer as clear from Enshin as possible whenever you see him start using these attacks. You'll need to be mindful and aware of when he does them, and create as much distance as you can. Besides that, this phase is exactly the same as the second phase, and he still uses all the exact same moves and behaviors. So we could still continue to rely on the exact same strategy that we've been using this entire time. Be on the lookout for his new lightning attacks, and continue to punish him after each and every one of his onslaughts. Do this enough times, and this method should carry you to the very end of the boss fight, thus marking your success. and congratulations on defeating one of the hardest bosses in the game. And now that the final boss fight has been concluded, it's very important that you do not talk to Kuro, who could be found in the same room where you defeated the boss. Talking to Kuro will actually trigger the end game sequence, thus finishing the game. So instead of talking to Kuro, this is exactly the right moment where you're going to want to back up your save data. And in case you don't know how to do that, I'll be showing you how to do it right now. So from the PlayStation menu, simply head to the settings, and then proceed to the Save Data and Game App Settings tab. From here, you'll want to click on your save data and go to Console Storage. Find your save file for Sekiro and upload this save file to the cloud. Doing this will officially back up your save file to the cloud. And once you've done this, now you could talk to Kuro, and you could now perform any 3 of the game's endings that are available to you. The Purification ending, the Return ending, as well as the Immortal Severance ending. Once you click on any of these 3 endings when interacting with Kuro, watch the final sequence and then wait for your trophy to pop. Then what you do is we go back exactly to the same spot where we backed up our save file, but instead we're going to be clicking on the cloud storage within the save data tab. And from here, we're going to find the file that we uploaded to the cloud originally, and we're going to save it back to the console storage. This will overwrite your current file and put you right back to before you interacted with Kuro. Doing this will allow you to get all 3 of the game's endings within one playthrough, thus saving you a hell of a lot of time and effort, and I highly recommend doing it this way. Otherwise, you'll have to play this game quite a lot. Now, once you start your New Game Plus playthrough, there are some things you will need to know right off the hop. The first of which is, as soon as you meet Kuro yet again at the very beginning of the game, he will bring up something about a charm. Now, this charm was given to you as a gift from Kuro himself, and so it is within your best interest to actually keep it. However, you will be given the option to give the charm back to Kuro when you speak with him. If you give the charm back to Kuro, this will make the game harder. It will essentially turn the game into hard mode, and overall it'll be a very unpleasant experience for you, unless you actually desire a challenge. But for the sake of platinuming this game, I would highly recommend not to do this. Now, if you did for whatever reason happen to accidentally give Kuro the charm, you will be given another opportunity to take the charm back once you reach the dilapidated temple and speak to the sculptor. He could give the charm back to you, thus removing the major difficulty. This will be immediately after the first encounter with Genichiro. Once you pass this point, however, your decision will be locked in, and you'll have to deal with the consequences. This is a warning, be highly aware of this. And now, once you've defeated the Guardian Ape and the Corrupted Monk on New Game Plus yet again, and we get back to Ashina Castle and encounter Owl, now is when you want to choose the first option instead of the second option. However, it is highly advised that you back up your save file before you do this. If you want to know how to back up your save file, refer to the timestamps in the description. The reason we want to back up our save file is because when you pick the first option, you will be locked into the Shura ending, and you will have to complete a boss fight, in which upon completing it, you will have beaten the game, and you will get the 4th and final ending that we're missing. However, we still want to continue through the game in order to get the final Lapis Lazuli that we need to finish upgrading our Shinobi prosthetic tools, so we don't want the game to end preemptively. So back up your save file before attempting this ending, and then go for the Shura ending. Now, the Shura ending will have you encounter a very unique boss fight. This boss fight will have you fight 2 bosses in a row, back to back. However, you should definitely have accomplished harder by this point, so it should be far from the realm of undoable. The first boss you'll encounter will be Emma, the Gentle Blade. Now, Emma is very straightforward. She's not designed to be all that difficult, especially considering she only has the 1 health bar. Emma can be very aggressive. However, you could pretty much treat the fight as if you're fighting Genichiro. Trade blows with her and parry whenever necessary. The only other thing I would warn you about is that Emma loves to spam unblockables. So jump her sweeps, grabs, and Makiri counter her whenever possible. Fight her enough times and you'll get used to her, and it'll get to the point where you're able to kill her no problem. The real challenge, however, lies immediately after Emma's boss fight, where you will have to fight Enshin Ashina, and this boss is far more of a challenge than Emma was. He has a plethora of attacks for you to learn in order to get a hold on his pattern, but he has many attacks that he could be punished after. With this boss, it's really just going to be practice, 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 and you'll have to keep fighting him over and over in order to learn his moveset and learn when he can be punished and when he can't. He can usually always be punished after his big fancy attacks, like the double Ichimonji attack, or when he erupts the flame pillars after the ground and and dashes at you with a flurry of sword slashes. He also has one where he does a flame wave on the ground, directly in front of him. He could be punished after all these attacks. Really, you're just playing a waiting game. The idea is to not get too overly zealous. Don't go crazy and constantly try to attack him. Wait for these opportunities and punish accordingly. With enough practice and patience, as well as good timing, you could definitely overcome this challenging boss fight. And once you defeat Enshin, that will reward you with the Shura ending. So you should now have every trophy for all endings in the game. And now, once you get to the very end of your second playthrough over on New Game Plus, and you've acquired all the extra Lapis Lazuli that you needed in order to finish your Shinobi Prosthetic Tool upgrades, now the final trophy you should have left is to acquire all skills within your combat style skill trees. This is by far the longest grind in the game, and it will most definitely be the last trophy you need in order to platinum. Now, there are many recommendations for how to go about grinding experience, and there are definitely more quick and optimal ways than most. However, I personally love my strategy the most, because it is absolutely in every way the path of least resistance, and requires absolutely minimal effort from the player. I'll show you what I mean in this demonstration example. So you start off at the upper tower antechamber Sculptor's Idol, over in Ashina Castle, and thus begins the circuit. You quickly make your way up the stairs and sneak up behind this ninja, and go ahead and land a stealth kill on him. Then you simply run out the room, jump over the banister, and grapple your way onto the support beam below. Doing this will trigger the two red samurai at the very bottom of the shaft to fight the chained ogre directly ahead. This will require you to not have killed the chained ogre, because upon defeat he will not respawn, so you want to leave him alive on New Game Plus. Leaving him alive will cause the inevitable death of the two samurai. They have no hopes of defeating the chained ogre, and they will run to their death every single time. From here, you simply warp back to the last communed idol and start all over again. Repeat the circuit. This way you're basically not doing anything, you basically don't have to lift a finger. The stealth kill is easy enough to get, and then you just have the points come to you. Keep repeating this circuit over and over, and eventually you will gather all experience points you need in order to acquire every skill in the game. Now this will take some time, several hours most likely. However, my favorite thing about this strategy is that you can essentially turn your brain off when doing it. These steps become almost robotic once you perform them enough. And as you're grinding out the XP, you could go ahead and listen to a podcast or watch some YouTube videos, hey, maybe a Twitch stream while you're doing this. And it makes the time go by much, much quicker. And it doesn't require too much attention or focus from you, so you could just keep repeating the steps with ease. Do this enough times, and you definitely won't regret the method chosen. You will acquire all the XP points you need, and eventually you will have every skill in the game, thus rewarding you the trophy. And with that, that should definitely be the last trophy you needed in order to platinum, and you should have your platinum by now. So congratulations, and thank you guys so much on watching this video. I truly hope you guys enjoyed the guide, and if you did, please don't forget to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and of course hit that notification bell to support me, and I would really appreciate that. It would mean a lot. And of course, if you want more platinums, don't forget to check out the Path to Platinum playlist over on my channel for many more guides on other games. Keep up to date with my channel for more trophy hunting related content and for more guides in the future. Anyways, that's going to be it for me. Take it easy, everybody. Have a good one, and I will definitely see you in the next one.